Having seen the importance of requirements, let us look at what constitutes a comprehensive requirement exercise. And this simple model which I have drawn here probably explains how a business analyst should function in today's world. On the one hand, he should focus on gathering, multi-sensing, shaping requirements of the customer and those expectations associated with these requirements. But on the other hand, having gathered the requirement, he should parallelly analyze those requirements, derive insights from the observations that he makes, and he visualizes both the needs and the solutions. Having done this, he generates a lot more questions. For instance, many of the diagramming techniques that we talk about in systems analysis, like an object relation diagram or data flow diagram, for instance, when you draw those diagrams, you are really analyzing it. So please, one of the comments that I have always is that as an analyst, please use all these tools and techniques not for documentation as is conventionally done, but use them as a mechanism for active thinking. So if you analyze using a data flow diagram and you find something missing, that's the question you want to go back and ask. So it's a virtuous cycle of analysis and observation, which gives you a more comprehensive requirement analysis. Now, where does this work? For instance, if as a business analyst tomorrow your company decides to send you to US for a 15-day study of the requirements of a particular business process in a client company, how will you work? During the day, you will have to go there, inspect documents, talk to end users, get clarifications about requirements and understand their perception about what they want. In the evening, when you're back in the hotel, you actually draw sketches, you draw data flow diagrams, you draw object models, you draw state transition diagrams, and a variety of techniques that are available and known to you. Each of these diagrams which will help you generate a whole lot of questions and clarifications which you need, which you can take the next day morning. And if you do that, so by the day you are studying, by the evening you are analyzing, by the day you are studying and observing, by the day you are, by evening you are again analyzing. If you do this, it will not only expedite your process of analysis, it will qualitatively improve the way you do analysis of a business requirement. And 15 days later when you come back, you find that your requirements are complete in terms of capture, and now you are ready to actually develop the solution. But there's one more dimension to it, and which is understanding the concept. What I mentioned earlier, that applications don't work in isolation. So when you study a business process, study the process in the context of the larger company, the philosophy of the company, the culture of the company, the way things work, the constraints, if any, for instance, that exist in the company in case you put up a solution. Just to give a simple example, I have done a lot of implementations within India, and one of them, let's say, is deep down somewhere in Rajasthan, in the heat of a factory. So 45 degrees, 50 degrees is the temperature. And you can imagine that a PCE which is kept there for an attendance system starts breaking down just because of the heat and dust which exists in the outside atmosphere there or in the factory environment. Not every place in the factory can probably be made air conditioned, so obviously it has to stand it. Now, is that a requirement? Yes and no. Nobody will tell you that there is a requirement, but I am providing a solution to a customer, which means that I need to have a sense that if I am putting up a PC, this is the environment it's going to really face. So some of these observations should be captured and converted into a subtle requirement, though the customer will not tell you. They are important for the success of the solution that finally you propose. And that's what learning about the context means. This actually requires being there, multi-sensing and observing in a deep manner. And that's getting the larger context. To sum up for the moment, studying a business process therefore involves a whole lot of things. The organization in its context, its strategic directions, the purpose of the business process, the context within which the process works, the actual flow of the process, the decision making that happens, the information needs that exist within, the transaction documents that you see, the volumes, for instance, the workload. So the system is designed not for 10,000 transactions but 20 lakh transactions a day, for instance. The design has to be completely different. So the volume has to be understood and conveyed to your software designer correctly. So as an analyst, it's my job to be the eyes and ears of my development team and do a very good job in terms of capturing everything that he or she needs to understand to be able to design a good, reliable and rugged solution. So this list is endless. There are so many things that one has to study. I'm just pointing out to some of them at this point of time, and we'll take them as they come a little later. The other point which I had stressed upon is to understand all this about a business process, you need to take as many perspectives as possible, and there are a large number of perspectives already there which we are aware of, and we need to look at all those perspectives as far as possible. But on the other hand, many more perspectives will get added over time, and as a business analyst I must learn those perspectives and be able to adopt them in my work practice. Just to give some examples, one of the things that traditionally we have understood is it's important to study the flow of a process. So what you call as the workflow, the process flow, the document flow, and there are different modeling techniques for each one of them that we are familiar with, which we need to sincerely try out, and when you draw those diagrams you get an understanding of the process quite well. You can actually physically trace how the process works in the office. So for instance, if this is a invoice document, it goes from table 1 to table 2, and what is done on table 2, and then it goes to table 3 and something else happens, etc. That's the workflow tracing that you need to do physically in an organization to be able to understand how workflow actually happens. So workflow and process flow is one perspective of a business process. Second is the information needs perspective. Ultimately, if you see, all technology deployment in a company is essentially to provide the right information for decision making at the right time, and of course to the right user. Now, you need to therefore be able to focus on individual users in a company in the workflow and ask a question: what is the kind of information that he needs to effectively do his job, and am I providing that information to him? So when you talk of requirements from a information needs point of view, you need to be able to ask a question: what job does he do, what is his role in the organization, and what kind of information and decisions does he take? Now based on that you can design appropriate information. There are techniques for understanding information needs. One very popular and very effective technique is that of critical success factors, which we will discuss in a few minutes. Process structure is another aspect of another perspective, as I call it, which is about the static aspect, the kind of classes, the kind of entities involved in a process, at the same time the kind of decisions and business rules. For instance, a large company works on business rules. There are certain standard rules written, some are not written, but really practiced in a company. Now when you do a software development for that company, many of these rules have to be understood and put in the software. For instance, how do you give discounts to a customer? There must be a rule in the company. Can I authorize a 1 crore rupee transaction if I am a manager in a company? It depends on the business rules set for me in that company. So I need to be able to understand those rules, find out where are those rules documented, if they are documented, or can I find it from users through interaction, or can I discover the rules using object analysis? These are a variety of techniques I need to apply to be able to understand the process structure of an organization. Business processes, however, in the real world are not as static. They are not like data flow diagrams. They are not like process charts. They are not like business rules. They are very dynamic. A lot of things go right, a lot of things go wrong. And it's important. In fact, the failure of software many times is not because of a smooth, normal transaction, but it's because of the exceptional conditions that happen. For example, when you go to a retail store at the billing counter, for instance, suddenly you find that the machine goes fat, or maybe the printer exhausts its cartridge, or a print, the paper slip which comes for printing. Now there is a timeout required to replace the paper, and for that point of time, you have a huge queue building up at the counter. Now these are exceptions. The question is your solution designed to handle a variety of exceptions? The more the variety of exceptions it can handle, the more rugged the solution and more foolproof that the solution is. And that's why your attempt is to understand the dynamics of the business process. And one very popular method of doing it is to understand objects and events. Events really are a variety of business events that can affect the object and its functioning. And if you study a long list of events that are possible in that context and provide appropriate solutions for it, then you get a comprehensive business solution. So we have talked about workflow, process flow, information needs, process structure, and the dynamic element of business processes. Now comes the more recent perspectives. One of them is the user view, the user personas. Like I said, you do a human-centered approach to analysis, trying to understand who are the people, what are their skill levels, what are the environment in which they are working, how will they use the system, what is the motivation of those people to use the system, and a whole lot of other questions. These are done typically by what you call as ethnographic methods, which is to see actually by observation how do people work and how would they like the system to interact with them. The second aspect, as I mentioned, is the larger enterprise context. What are the challenges facing the company itself? What is its strategic positioning? What is it trying to achieve? And what is the impact of all of this on the application that you are trying to design? And the last perspective, but not the least, of course, is the security and quality aspect. So essentially what you're saying is there are a whole lot of perspectives. The example of the architect which I took, you see the inside view, the outside view, the top view, etc. Try and get as many different views about a business process so you gain a complete understanding of the process, and then sit back and visualize a solution which is most appropriate in that context.